Last week, more than 8.5 million computers stopped working. The post-industrial and very much digital world in which we live, much of it anyway, came to a halt as well. Airlines couldn't check in travelers, hospitals had to find quick workarounds to help patients, and even restaurants had to resort to paper and pencil to make reservations. By now, you've certainly heard that CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity company, inadvertently caused the chaos with a faulty update to its Falcon Sensor software. That software, oddly enough, is supposed to detect cyber attacks and prevent this sort of cataclysmic problem from happening in the first place. Within 24 hours, although the problem was mostly fixed, the residual effects of the outage and millions in economic losses had many thinking twice about how to prevent this sort of outage from ever happening again. I'm Cody Combs, future editor for The National, and on this edition of Business Extra, we speak with Igor Bershadsky, an expert in computer networking, IT consulting, and cybersecurity based out of the United Arab Emirates, to explain what happened, why it happened, and what can be done and what should be done to prevent it from happening again. Without further ado, joining us to discuss this, I think it's safe to say unprecedented IT crash, Igor Bershadsky, co-founder of Dubai-based Phron AI. Igor, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Cody. Pleasure to be here.
First off, Igor, I have to ask you, while CrowdStrike accurately pointed out that this wasn't a nefarious cyber attack, but rather an IT error caused by an update, the end result was that a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world grinded to a halt. Sort of the worst-case scenario in your line of work that you try to prevent. What did you think when this was all unfolding?
The first perception was definitely that there's a definite attack happening. And then, as everybody came to a halt, there was a lot of speculation. And personally, for me, it was mainly the video of the actual gentleman that had deployed the new code that kind of settled things and put people at ease. And of course, as a cybersecurity company, anything that is deployed should be re-verified. And as a common practice from my days in cybersecurity with hacking, we never release any code or we never release anything that hasn't been verified by multiple identities. So at least as a common practice, 3 or more people should be verifying it, especially code of that magnitude, code that actually affects so many people, so many systems. Was it 8.5 million Microsoft devices were affected? That's huge. I mean, something like over 30,000 subscribers worldwide they have, and I don't know, have they been affected? But thus far, like flights have been delayed, hospitals, it's just horrible.
Now, you touched on this a little bit with that answer, but in a nutshell, what went wrong? We hear about this software that was rolled out, and the general consensus, at least at first, from many IT professionals was, why didn't they do a staged rollout? I don't think we have necessarily a clear answer on that yet, or maybe you have some insight as a professional.
Each company has their own protocol. So each entity that does things like that, they have their own protocol on how to roll out new features, new updates. And it's common for them to be flawed, and that's okay. That's part of the industry. However, it should be in a safe mode. It should be rolled out. It should be tested before deploying it live. So it kind of goes back to what is the inner protocol of the company, how they do things. And from my understanding, this was a gentleman that was recently hired. I mean, literally days prior to that. So did he not know? Did he not have a proper onboarding on the things and the protocols that they have in place? They're a well-known company that's been in the industry for a while. So I'm assuming this is just, I don't want to blame HR, but this is kind of like an onboarding glitch of introducing the employees to their protocols and how the things to have been deployed.
If true, that is indeed a rough debut at the office. Why weren't Macs affected? And you had a lot of Linux users sort of not celebrating, but sort of breathing a sigh of relief as well. What's going on there?
I think from what I understand, it was Microsoft-enabled systems that were solely isolated by faulty software update that was pertaining to I guess PCs, and because Linux runs on a different platform, it's a different operating system. It didn't integrate there. So I think that might have been, and I don't know what actually went wrong in the actual code that was deployed. So the speculations can go we can go crazy with different. It could be a simple line of code. It could be as simple as a period or a comma that affected this. It's not unheard of. But I would think that this was solely because of the error in the code that was affected by Microsoft.
In the Wall Street Journal, one of their many articles on this, a Microsoft spokesperson said that unlike Apple, Microsoft cannot wall off its operating system because of regulatory agreements reached with the European Commission and other entities. Is there any truth to that, you think? Does that make any sense?
I think it's a proud moment for Maxis are definitely having a proud moment. I think this is just their way of saying that it's something in regulation, but I'm not really feeling it. I think it's all comes down to the code. That's it.
You mentioned in one of your answers briefly that you're well aware of CrowdStrike software. You know about it, and a lot of people in the IT industry know about it. But for millions of people around the world, last week was their first time hearing about it. Can you shed some light? Just how prevalent is the CrowdStrike company?
So my understanding, their specialty is in enterprises. So that's why majority of the people wouldn't know them. It's not like let's say McAfee, or it's not like something that day to day people see it. And cybersecurity, specialists would know of their own, let's say. But this is more of a B2B company, right? So people that are B2C, the front end users that are using the tools that they're securing, won't typically know who stands in the back. That's why for most it was an unheard of companies, something that they've never interacted with, and so that's probably it. Majority of us know McAfee and stuff like that. We know tooling that is visible on our screens, but those that are on the back end that take the heavy burden, the heavy loads, they're unfortunately the heroes that go unnoticed.
Even though this was, in the strictest technical sense, an IT failure and not necessarily a cybersecurity failure, does this show just a hint of cybersecurity vulnerabilities as to how bad they can possibly get?
I think this is, an epic fail that, shows the capacity. It could have gone even more. It could have gone worse had the code been augmented in a different way, and the rollout was different, of a bigger magnitude. This was rather, from what I understand, rather quick fix. And also the CEO, his name is George Kurtz. They were really quick on responding and doing damage control. But I think it's just because of the rollout was that, I guess, not significant. So the damage wasn't that bad, but it could have done a lot greater damage that couldn't have restored a lot of these devices from remote. So this could have been a lot worse from what I see.
Is there anything that is still unknown, or do you have anything that you're still curious about as to how this still unfolded?
I have a lot of questions. The questions: how did this happen? How does one person has access? How's it not multi-level authorization provided? How come one person has an ability to do any rollout of that magnitude that can kind of damage the system in this way? So anything like this has to have not only multiple verifiers within the company, and then it should be like multi-sig. So we work with blockchain. Some of the things that prevent from unauthorized activities is called multi-sig. And so something like this should be embedded as part of their requirements for their process. So this should be done like one rolls out, one verifies and approves, and then another person verifies and approves. So I think they're definitely going to implement some changes. I am a strong believer in that. They'll definitely learn from this. But that's one thing that could have prevented this. And it seems to me like they had none of this enforced.
Your mention of blockchain leads me to my next question. With your current company, Phron AI, you talk a lot about decentralized AI integrated networks. The word decentralized gets thrown around a lot. In the context of this IT outage and cybersecurity in general, what does that mean?
It's essentially decentralized, meaning that there's if and then. There's smart contracts that if you do a transaction, then the contract kind of fulfills the commitment that you make. So it allows a certain level of certainty. And so this is something that within the code, something that the cybersecurity companies are doing with blockchain is that they're validating that these codes are written out properly so that people have a peace of mind that if they're doing a transaction, they're doing an exchange from A to B, then it's going to be fulfilled in exactly the same way. That's what the cybersecurity companies and blockchain do. So it should, in ideal, give you the validation and peace of mind that, if you're doing this transaction and it's been validated and audited by a proper security company, then you're going to be safe. And that's what is actually becoming a new norm. And that's what a lot of cybersecurity companies like Hacking, where I was, what they're doing is they're validating that the projects are valid. The projects don't embed backdoors, allowing withdrawal of funds and so on. So this is something that the industry, very young, is very actively moving towards securing the users, securing communities and investors, and that's a really big deal. They're taking cybersecurity in a very serious way.
Would that sort of decentralized approach potentially have prevented this sort of thing, or is that just apples and oranges?
Apples and oranges. In this case, it's definitely apples and oranges. It's different. This could have been done the same way with decentralized with blockchain. It's the same idea. When you roll out, there is a concept. Even if the system is audited and the code review has been done, you still have to roll it out in a test mode and verify that it kind of clicks together. That that the new integration is not going to affect other things. We do see that in other industries as well. So this is what happened there could happen elsewhere, but there's fail safes that should be implemented within the projects and within the kind of their technical team.
So while this all still potentially, hypothetically, goes back to one person who may not have been onboarded properly.
In layman terms, yes. Yes, very much so. I think there needs to be a very clear, that's something at Phron that we're doing. We're being in a fairly new project, and all the things that we're deploying, we're having multiple people review. And of course, then we are having a professional cybersecurity company review the code before we deploy it. So, I'd say at any given time, anything that is deployed, in our case, is being reviewed by at least 6 to 8 different people. So, yes, this is just with our backgrounds, we are implementing. It's a costlier implementations. It's more time consuming implementations, but it's also kind of avoids the situations like what happened here.
A lot of people made the immediate comparisons to Y2K, which was well known about a decade before it actually happened, and there were countless resources dedicated to fixing the Y2K problem. All those disastrous scenarios, however, that didn't come to fruition back then, sort of did come to fruition briefly for this, although it's a completely different problem. What did you think of just how many things were affected? Were you surprised?
It was bound to happen. This is a worst nightmare for anybody in this position, and to be honest, this was kind of long overdue. Everybody had expectations of something like this, and this being the kind of, like I said, this is the worst nightmare for anybody in this situation. When you're affecting so many institutions, so many entities, organizations. Look, this particular case is kind of going back to validating and making sure, having preventative measures. Y2K was known way in advance. There was a lot of reviews, a lot of code releases, a lot of updates, and they've been tested, or they weren't as major. So something like this, could happen. The reason we're hearing about it, the reason we're here talking about it, is because of the magnitude. The bigger, they're saying the bigger you are, the bigger you'll fall. Same situation. Just because they have been connected to so many devices, because they're so big as an entity, and they're connected to so many computers and screens are operated through this. That's why we're talking about it. This happens, unfortunately, more often than not. So nobody was really from the industry. Nobody was, once they figured out what happened, nobody was surprised, I think. It's just that for the time being, until it was understood what happened, everybody did kind of like take a step back, try to figure out what is going on. Yeah.
Last question. Do you think any lessons were learned, or is this going to be one of those things where, because of the news cycle, we had so much happen recently that this is going to be quickly forgotten and we'll be left vulnerable again?
I want to say that there's going to be regulatory compliance and requirements, and the for companies that integrate with airlines and hospitals, because data and there's so many operational moments that have gone frozen for an undetermined period. I think they're going to make some requirements. At the very least, the CrowdStrike is definitely going to implement some sort of kind of protocol pertaining to new rollouts. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But I think based off of this, and just because of the amount of kind of media that this has collected, there's going to be definitely repercussions in terms of how things are done for enterprises.
Well, let's hope there was some lessons learned. Igor from Phron AI, thanks so much for joining us for this Business Extra podcast.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of Business Extra Podcast. Please subscribe to Business Extra on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasting content so you can get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. This episode was produced by Doa Fareed and Arthur Edison. I'm Cody Combs, future editor for The National. Thanks so much for listening.